strike again.
Welcome everybody, thanks for coming out tonight. Wednesday night lab. This is November 3rd. Next week, November 10th, Paulo Desiati from Wisconsin ISU Observatory is going to be here. Next week, November 10th, is International Cosmic Day to celebrate cosmic rays. If you do not know why it's not called Cosmic Ray Day, they just call it Cosmic Day. Paulo works on cosmic rays, so he's going to give us a deep background on them and for an update on his research. Paulo and I have known each other for about 18 years, and on occasion we go out, I take people out for beers afterwards. So if anybody'd like to go either to the library itself, Paulo gets an account to call. Go out and celebrate. If you'd like to do that too. Okay. On November 17th, John Ralph, who's with the Department of Biochemistry and Wisconsin Energy Institute and the Great Lakes Bioenergy Center, will be here to talk about lignins. Intrigue and controversy surrounding the little-known names of polymers. So if you took a course in botany, like I did long ago, you remember them. Things we didn't know about lignins. So I'm looking forward to hearing about them. All about our cousins. November 24th is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We go dark every year before then, so through the woods. So we will not be the Wednesday night lab. We'll resume on Wednesday, December 5th. So look forward to seeing everybody by Zoom or here in the room.
We are one and a half.
That's right. I'm going to do the little more formal part and cut all this stuff off. Welcome everyone to Wednesday Night Lab. I'm Tom Zimmerman. I work here at the Madison Biotechnology Center. I also work for the Division of Extension, Wisconsin 4-H, and on behalf of those folks and our other co-organizers, PBS Wisconsin, Wisconsin Alumni Association, and Madison Science Alliance, thanks again for coming to Wednesday Night Lab. We do this every Wednesday night, 50 times a year. Tonight it's my pleasure to introduce to you Taylor Seale. She's with UW-Madison Dane County Extension. She and I are colleagues in the Division of Extension. And I'm delighted to have her here. She just finished her master's in public health. I'm about to ask her the 5 questions. Taylor, where were you born?
I was born in Seattle.
Seattle, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school at St. Joseph High School in Ogden, Utah.
And where'd you go for undergrad and what did you study?
I went to Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was a dual theater and business administration major.
And then where'd you go for your MPH?
I went here at UW, and I just graduated in May of 2021.
You also have a certificate from the University of Florida.
I do. I have an Arts and Public Health certificate from the Center for Arts and Medicine at the University of Florida.
And then when did you start at Dane County Extension in UW-Madison?
Right after Labor Day. So this is a new position for me still.
So I was really intrigued when I had a chance to meet you because of your background. The title of your talk is Positive Youth Development at the Intersection of Arts and Public Health. This is a whole new combination for me. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Would you please join me in welcoming Taylor Seale to Wednesday Night Lab?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. It is an honor to be here. And before I begin, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much to Tom, and thank you so much to the biotech team and Wednesday Night at the Lab team. It's an honor to be here. I also wanted to give thanks to the School of Medicine and Public Health here at UW, the Center for Humanities here at UW, and the Center for Arts and Medicine at the University of Florida, as well as the organizations that I worked with for this project, including the Madison Youth Arts Center, the Goodman Community Center, the Odyssey Project, Lucier Community Center, Warner Park, and Briar Patch Youth Services. So just an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. First, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the Madison Youth Arts Center, which is a newly developed building here in Madison. I'm going to then go talk about adverse childhood experiences as well as intervention examples through the arts. And then I'll go with public health frameworks and intervention examples. And then I'll talk about my Master of Public Health project through the Madison Youth Arts Center. And then I'll end with my summary and recommendations that I gave to the Madison Youth Arts Center. So just an overview of the Madison Youth Arts Center. This was just opened in just the past couple of months. It started in 2017, 2018 when plans were underway. And really the reason for this was being built is to have an equitable and accessible space for arts organizations to hold their programming. I've worked for several of the arts organizations here in Madison, and I can speak from experience that it was a challenge to always be finding week after week where you're going to host your programming. One week it'll be in one place, another week it'll be in a different place, and it just made it really difficult. So this space was envisioned for artists and arts organizations to have a centralized hub where there were multiple studio spaces, a big auditorium. So no matter what kind of programming you did, it was here and it was open for all of Madison's youth to enjoy. So where I can come in is for youth who are engaging in the arts, and we know the benefits that they receive from engaging in the arts, and such as positive peer support, increased self-confidence, increased self-esteem. Before they can benefit all of these, we first need to address those socioeconomic needs and those access barriers to this space. Really, public health calls for the collaboration cross-sector, and the arts are part of this call. And so really this Arts Center, and part of what my project was giving them a foundation, a toolkit, some data and recommendations of how this Arts Center can support youth through socioeconomic support systems, as well as build resiliency through the arts. So adverse childhood experiences, these are defined as exposure to violence, to abuse, to neglect or trauma, and youth who experience ACEs and have toxic stress, and lots and lots of toxic stress over a long period of time has negative impacts both in short-term development and long-term development. ACEs can affect problem-solving skills, engaging with peers positively, as well as have an increase in risky behaviors such as substance abuse or teen pregnancy, as well as youth who are exposed to ACEs during childhood are much more likely to develop chronic diseases as adults, such as diabetes, heart disease, or depression. So to mitigate ACEs, you need to build resilience, right? And resilience can be thought of as overcoming setbacks. You can think of it like a buoy. When you push down, it'll float back up. But unfortunately, this definition makes it seem like an individual trait, something that an individual possesses. So for example, though, if a youth were to not overcome the adversities that they were to face, then it would be their fault that they didn't build enough resiliency or have enough resiliency. So really what we want to do is we actually want to approach resilience as how are we building resilient environments, and how can the environments that we are in build resiliency for people to be resilient. And in particular, the CDC calls for a multi-layered comprehensive approach, right? And so this means that anywhere from our school settings, our home settings, our neighborhoods, our community centers, and art centers are a part of mitigating these ACEs and building positive youth development. And so when we think of what builds resiliency, we think of a lot of key factors, including positive peer support, engaging with a non-parent adult in a trusting relationship, increased confidence, and increased critical thinking and problem-solving skills. What's amazing is that the arts encompass all of these factors. And so the arts are a unique environment to address ACEs, and it's really a useful resource to impact this. And if it impact this in the short term and during childhood, it will impact health not only in childhood, but adulthood. So here's an example that I'd like to share. This organization is called Urban IMPROV, and it uses theater as a really important resiliency tool in schools, particularly focusing on self-expression and peer support. So using improv as a methodology, students can act out scenarios that they face on a daily basis, including violence or anger or family issues. And using improv, then they're allowed to freeze the scene and try different approaches for solutions. They can observe scenes objectively, they can learn from their peers, and they have a better understanding of consequences of their actions. And as you can see here from this quote, results from these improv workshops affected the school environment positively, from fewer fights and angry outbursts, more cooperation and self-assertion with peers, and more attentiveness and engagement in the classroom. Another example I like to use is called VOICES, and this is based in Los Angeles. And this was a program for young people who were formerly incarcerated. And for young people who were formerly incarcerated, stressors of poverty and violence and discrimination affect them, as well as they have an increased likelihood of poor academic performance and poor social development. So using poetry, these students were able to learn about the structure of poetry and come up with their own poems, as well as then later record those poems to music in a recording studio. And so this was resilient because they were interacting and collaborating with their peers, often from rival gangs. And collaborating with those peers fostered empathy, respect, and ultimately transformed that school environment into a welcoming one. And the last example that I would like to show as well is called the Artists Collective. And this is in an inner city community center in Connecticut. And really this was created for a safe space for young people to engage with their peers and reduce exposure to the violence and substance abuse that was in their neighborhood. And so the Artists Collective hosted a variety of dance and music and summer camps and employment programs. And really just showing how the arts they help them build resilience through self-esteem and positive social skills. So again, we want to be thinking about how we approach resiliency, not as an individual trait, but rather how can we shape environments and foster and build resilience. And this is really a call to other sectors, other organizations of how we can all work together to create a network of support for youth health and well-being. So this encompasses what's called the fifth wave of public health. Currently, we're in the fourth wave of public health, and this diagram demonstrates the evolution of public health improvements from structural to biomedical to clinical, and where we're at currently, the social and the social determinants of health. And the social determinants of health incorporate education, income, and access and quality of our healthcare. And so here, the fifth wave is a shift from individual to community culture. And so here, arts and culture can come to the forefront of public health innovation and understand their value and role. So how can we as a community create a culture of health? Another framework that I like to show as well is the County Health's ranking model, which was developed here at the University of Wisconsin through the Population Health Institute. And this diagram just shows the many different factors that affect our health, ranging from education, access to care, social influences, built environments, and health behaviors. But what I want to focus on here is that 40% of our health factors that affect our health outcomes come from social and economic factors. So when we think about how the Madison Youth Arts Center can support and improve the health of communities through things like education, like employment, income, family and social support, and safety through the arts. And then here is a diagram that I created, which was adapted from the Bay Area Regional Health Inequities Initiative. And this is just a visual of the social determinants of health. And the social determinants of health are the conditions in which people are born, where they live, where they learn, where they work and play, and how all of these come together that affect our health. And so right now, current public health practice is downstream, and we really want to be thinking about how we can go upstream into more emerging public health practice. And when we go more upstream, when we start addressing things like living conditions, institutional inequities, and social inequities, then we can have better health outcomes in the future. This is a resilience framework. And when we're talking about resilience, we're talking about someone's capacity to rise above difficult circumstances and setbacks. But again, we really want to be thinking about resilience of how it can be built through shaping external factors like our resources, like our environments and our communities. So here I like this diagram because I really think it shows the interconnectedness between all of our environments, particularly with family, with school and community, and how all of these play into leading youth and young people on a protecting pathway or a promoting pathway to healthy youth development. So creative placemaking is when arts and culture are intentionally integrated into community planning and development. And essential to creative placemaking is called human-centered design, where community members can provide locally informed insight, expertise, and lived experiences to help shape their environments. And particularly, we want to talk about how we can leverage youth voices as a strategy for creative placemaking, because youth also have locally informed insight, expertise, and lived experiences that shape their environment. And so there are many different existing programs that already do this, and so I'm going to share that with you. The first is Arts Core, and their mission is to really eliminate barriers to accessing arts education, so young people can creatively lead in transformation of their schools, of their neighborhoods, of their communities. And this is really youth-centered leadership. It provides opportunities to shape school and community initiatives, but using arts as a methodology for that. And here, Reframe Youth Arts Center really focuses on youth-centered frameworks, youth-run programming, and really centering youth as knowledge producers to really shift culture and build relationships with their community, using the arts and igniting social and political change, again, through the arts. And lastly, the RYSE Center. Here, youth are given tools and resources to address emotional, mental, physical, and political issues that affect health and well-being in the communities that they live in. And this organization has a variety of programs, including an education and justice program, a community health program, a youth organizing initiative, again, all through arts and culture. So when we talk about engaging key stakeholders, this is something that's used in public health often. Engaging key stakeholders really informs best practices, but unfortunately, youth are often left out of the conversation. And this is in part due to a developmental mismatch where youth are, on one hand, are expected to be leaders in their community. They're expected to be in this kind of role, but then when they want to share their opinions, then people say, no, you're too young. So it's kind of this catch-22 that youth often face. But in reality, putting youth in placemaking and change-making roles and utilizing youth in shared decision-making processes ultimately makes better and informed policies and programs. So now I'm going to talk about the Madison Youth Arts Center in a little bit more depth. This was part of my Master's of Public Health thesis project that I had to do. So again, just a little overview of the space. It's a $35 million development. It just opened recently in the past couple of months. It's massive. It's kind of near East Washington and Mifflin if you're in that area. And it was also part of a larger development of some apartments and retail spaces. There's 15 studios, a 300-seat theater, visual art gallery spaces, shared office spaces for anchor partners, community spaces, as well as this space really focuses on the performative arts, such as music, dance, and theater. So I came on in the fall of 2019 to approach them to do a project. And at that time, they were just wrapping up some focus groups that were held with adults. And these adults were leaders in youth organizations, ranging anywhere from a principal of a school to a worker in a community center or community setting. And so they were asked very general questions such as, what excites you about this space? How do you envision the youth that you serve utilizing the space? What worries you? What concerns do you have? What access barriers do you anticipate? And so then the first part of my project was doing a qualitative analysis of these transcripts to help them identify the major themes and priorities. And once those major themes and priorities were identified, then I would shape the second part of my project from that. So the first priority that was identified in these adult focus groups was having a welcoming atmosphere within the center. And this really was an emphasis on whoever came in, both parents and youth and artists, this emphasis on feeling respected, valued, welcomed, included, represented, celebrated, and supported from all backgrounds. And as you can see here from the Lighthouse Christian School, really being able to understand that many youth who will be coming to the Madison Youth Arts Center are dealing with things like deportation and poverty and homelessness and trauma. And so if we are expecting to have this space serve all of Madison's youth, then we also need to be able to have the support systems for these youth to thrive. The second priority was having a diverse staff and board, and again, an emphasis on hiring diverse and culturally competent staff to interact with a variety of those cultural, ethnic, socioeconomic, educational, and societal backgrounds. And then the last major theme was youth and parent engagement, and really an emphasis on youth empowerment, youth involvement, how this space can be a center for youth resources, as well as having parents understand the benefits of participating in the arts. So these were the three main priorities that I had identified through my qualitative analysis. And so from there, I wanted to create a framework or a toolkit for the Madison Youth Arts Center leadership to use before the center was open. So first, I wanted to identify access barriers and provide solutions to those access barriers to address inclusion and equity. And those access barriers that were particularly identified were food security, income, safety, and transportation. And then at this point in time, no youth had been formally surveyed. I was told that we could talk to youth after the center was open, but that doesn't make any sense. So I decided to make it a part of my project and really tying in from that youth and parent engagement of how we're going to incorporate youth voice into this toolkit. And especially if I'm providing recommendations, I definitely want to be able to talk to young people about this space. So again, you know, when we're talking about this is an amazing arts center, there's so many things that they can experience. Here are all the benefits of engaging through the arts. First, we need to address those access barriers. And vital to this success is identifying youth as key stakeholders. And once we do that, you know, their input, their ideas, their solutions, it's really vital to the success and the sustainability of the organization. And so by merging public health with the arts, along with meaningful youth input, the Madison Youth Arts Center and spaces like the Madison Youth Arts Center can become more than just a performance space, but rather a space that youth can build resiliency through artistic expression while also having community support systems. So again, the Madison Youth Arts Center and spaces like the Madison Youth Arts Center have the opportunity to support youth and well-being and development through the arts. So through these youth-centered designs, through resilience framework, and through youth leadership opportunities and addressing these access barriers, it becomes a space that promotes health on a community level. So for example, here is just a very brief snapshot of food access here in Dane County. And food insecurity is connected to physical, cognitive, and psychological stressors. And youth who are food insecure are more likely to do poorly in school, have difficulty forming positive peer relationships. And then for income, you know, students who come from low-income families often live in unsafe and stressful environments. Youth who come from low-income backgrounds tend to have higher blood pressure, as well as higher toxic stress levels, as well as have the likelihood of having, again, poor school performance and poor peer interaction. And then when it comes to youth mental safety and physical safety, we know that LGBTQ youth, youth of color and low-income youth, and youth with disabilities disproportionately suffer from poor mental health. And then mental illness is likely to have you know, consequences again as adults. So if they are struggling with mental illness as a child, then they're also more likely to have chronic disease as adults, including heart disease and diabetes. And again, here, you know, if a student has a higher ACE score, a higher adverse childhood experiences score, then this means, again, across the board, they are much more likely to not finish high school. They are much more likely to become homeless. They are much more likely to have a teenage pregnancy, misuse substances, and develop, again, chronic conditions as adults. And then for transportation, you know, some areas here, I think particularly in downtown Madison, have bus line services every 5 minutes. But then when you start to get to the outskirts of the city, sometimes it can be anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes before the next bus comes. And especially in low income areas, there are already limited service lines, as well as a lack of sidewalks, which makes it really unsafe for young children to be trying to board the bus without any sidewalks. And buses here are often operating at max capacity. So if you're waiting for the bus for an hour, the bus might come and be full. So then you have to wait for the next bus to come. So really our system as it currently is not a reliable mode of transportation. So again, these were the three priorities that were addressed through the adult focus groups. And then for my project, I provided background information and research and data and recommendations of how to address these access barriers. But then the next part, which was my favorite part, was holding youth focus groups. And really, again, just, you know, incorporating that youth voice and how they envision this space to be for them and their peers. So this is a snapshot of how many youth I reach. I talked to 53 youth participants. This was done in January through March of 2021. The age range was 11 to 17, and I worked with 5 community organizations. And again, I just want to say thank you so much to the Warner Park Community Center, Odyssey Junior, the Goodman Community Center, the Lucier Community Center, and Briar Patch Youth Services for working with me on this project. It was amazing for me to get connected to the young people that they work with. And every single youth that I worked with was compensated. And I think that that's a very important thing as well, because if we're valuing their time, they are experts. And so therefore we should pay them for their time. So it was really fun. What we did was I structured the beginning of the focus groups. It's very similar to the adult focus groups, showed them a map, showed them kind of proposed pictures of what the Arts Center will look like, and then just ask them very general questions. What excites you about the space? What questions do you have? What kind of programming do you want to see? And then we shifted into asset mapping, where we really talked about access barriers and how we're going to get youth to the space, and then also what tools and resources do they need once they're at the center. And youth really identified the different resources that youth needed and the challenges surrounding things like program availability, the types of programs that they wanted, safety, food resources, transportation, as well as opportunities for youth leadership and advocacy roles. So this was a map of where they were held. So the purple dots are the schools where youth were from, and then the yellow dots were where the focus groups were held. So as you can see, I really tried to make sure that I was capturing different areas of Madison and not just primarily on the near east side where the Arts Center is located. So again, for asset mapping, this is a really useful methodology where participants can identify existing resources and opportunities for change within their communities. And specifically in working with youth, I was told before I had these focus groups, I was told repeatedly that I wouldn't be able to get kids to talk to me because they had teenagers at home and they can barely get a word out of them. But then I gave them a crisp $10 bill and they talked with me for an hour and a half. And then they also said that, when it comes to asset mapping, that youth wouldn't be able to vocalize, critical and complex topics like social inequities and infrastructures. But there was the opposite. This was a very successful method in how youth vocalized their experiences, their ideas, their needs, and solutions for this space. So this is first what they were given, a map, the stars where the Madison Youth Arts Center is located, and again, pictures of what the proposed space would look like. Then we shifted into this kind of gamifying asset mapping activity, where if they flipped the sheet, they had this piece of paper with these little icons on it. And then I had a deck of cards that I created and each deck was something different. So the first deck was what neighborhood the youth was from, what race or ethnicity they were, what age they were, their transportation situation, as well as a wild card ranging from food insecurity to disabilities to transitional housing and safety. So as a group, we would randomly pull from each deck, and the youth had to work together to discuss how can they get to how can this imagined youth get to the Arts Center? And then what do they need when they get there? And what can we build upon? What existing resources can we build upon? So this is an example of a scenario that was pulled. So this young person lives on the west side. They are 6 years old. They're Hispanic. There's no bus line through their neighborhood, and they're in transitional housing. So now I'm going to turn the tables to the audience. Before I share what youth said, I would like you just to shout out, what do you think this youth needs? How do they get to the Arts Center? And then what do they need when they're at the Arts Center? A way home, absolutely.
Language assistance.
Language assistance, great, absolutely.
To feel safe enough to go away from home.
To feel safe, yep, absolutely. Okay, great. So youth had much more to say, by the way. First, when it came to getting to the Arts Center, right? So they said, well, could another family member perhaps take them? Is there a carpool situation that can be created? Also, can there be bus passes? Even though this particular student is too young to ride the bus by themselves, it would be helpful to have a stack of 2-ride bus passes at the Arts Center for youth to use. They also talked about how the Madison Youth Arts Center should invest its own fleet of vans and buses that can specifically go into these neighborhoods that have very limited or no bus lines. We also had a student say that youth should design and paint the buses and vans in bright colors, so when it's going down the street, people will want to go to it. I said he had a future in marketing for sure. But they also said that neighborhoods, community centers, and schools can be established and trusted pickup points for these students. So instead of creating a new route, use what is already there. They also said because this student was 6, it would be really helpful to have a check-in area, to have a tour guide, to have someone who can take them where they need to go. And when it came to transitional housing, youth had many different definitions. So I didn't tell them the definition of what transitional housing is, but one student said it meant staying at mom's on the weekends and staying with dads on the weekdays. One student said that it meant that a youth was in foster care, so they would move from house to house. Another student said that perhaps they're not having the best relationship with a parent or guardian, so they're couch surfing on a friend's house or at a friend's house. And then another student also said that perhaps they were experiencing homelessness and were in a temporary shelter. And all of these are correct. And so in particular for this youth who was experiencing transitional housing, they said that because they were in transitional housing, perhaps it would be really helpful for them to have food or snack when they came to the Arts Center. They also said that, because they may come from a more unstable home environment, tracking all of the materials that they need for classes, from dance shoes to art supplies, might be left at different places. So it would be really helpful to have a cubby or a locker, or just materials that youth can use with no questions asked. They also said specifically that they needed love and assurance and caring, and that particularly being around safe people was really important for this young youth at the Arts Center. And so then youth explored even further to say that there should be a counselor on staff and there should be youth advocates on staff to really be making sure that these kids who are coming in are getting the resources that they need. So again, these were the, out of all of the focus groups, I'd say these were the major priorities and themes that came out of those focus groups: safety and well-being, youth leadership, and accessibility of the space. So when it came to accessibility, youth really went beyond, I think, what adults envision this space to be. They really thought about, and this was through almost all of the focus groups, said that they wanted a recording studio and a culinary arts program, as well as a library to do homework. They also emphasized that, it would be really helpful to have both walk-in classes and classes that you signed up for in advance. So if you knew you were having a class on Tuesday, that was put in your planner or your phone, and then also you could just leave after school and see what was there at the center. They also said that they wanted to be able to be in this space and not take a class. So that's why I feel like having a library or having these more community spaces where young people can just gather and hang out with their friends. Teens specifically said that they wanted a specific age-appropriate teen area away from the smaller kids. And thinking of having all of these programs be available not only after school, but also on weekends. Youth also really stressed the importance of having programming be free of cost, or at least having some programming that's always available be free of cost. They really emphasize that if it's supposed to be equitable access, then you need to make it equitable. They had lots of different ideas for how to offset costs, things like having a gallery that youth can sell their art, designing the merchandise for the building that can be sold, as well as things like having free trial classes, and then later you can sign up, as well as having incentives for young people to be volunteers or teaching assistants. And if you're in that role, then you receive free courses. And then, of course, having some kind of transportation or through a bus or a shuttle. And then again, through youth leadership, youth really emphasized how they can incorporate their voices and opportunities through things like a youth board, through youth showcases, through youth design merchandise, really emphasizing youth decision-making with adults. Things like from workshops to assistantships to internships to college credit, as well as mentorship opportunities. Youth said that it would be really great to have like a big brothers, big sisters kind of program within the art space, where older youth can be paired with a younger youth and help them do projects, but also be another net that looks out for them when they're there. And they also said that, it'd be great to have youth be on staff. So they could be the tour guide, they could be the tour guides, they can be the front desk greeters, particularly when they say that if I walk into the front area and it's a kid, I'll talk to the kid. And also that's amazing. And then for safety and well-being, youth really identified both physical and mental needs for safety. Really, again, discussing solutions and having conversations surrounding transitional housing, youth with disabilities, and LGBTQ+ youth. And youth, they talked about everything from having a counselor on staff, an accessibility coordinator, translators, diverse staff, bathroom inclusivity, and again, being around safe people. So this was the summary here, again, for this is the youth focus groups that I had. For leadership, having youth board members, youth interns, youth teaching assistants, youth mentors, incorporating youth voice and decision-making processes. They really focused on the accessibility of the space, what types of programming were offered, what was the cost, when were these programs offered, and then how are they going to use the space on a day-to-day basis. And then again, with safety and well-being, addressing all of the access barriers that adults did as well in those adult focus groups, things like food security, transportation, being around safe people, like having youth advocates and counselors on staff, and just that general support system. So again, with all of the focus groups that I had, 100% of the focus groups asked if there would be food at the center. Providing healthy snacks and meals for all youth reduces social stigma, increases food security, and supports healthy cognitive and physical development in youth. All of the focus groups asked how much it would cost for them to participate. They emphasized the importance of having free of cost programming available, and that this reduces the social stigma and increases equitable participation and opportunity. In particular, they said that creating paid jobs or internship opportunities for youth cultivates youth leadership, community, and life skills for the future. All of the focus groups asked if there would be transportation. And having consistent, safe, and reliable modes of transportation for all ages was one of the biggest recommendations that I gave to the Arts Center. And this can be in a variety of different ways. It can be from bus passes to partnering with school and community center transportation systems and investing in vans or buses. And for safety and belonging, really having established trauma-informed environments, policies, and positions that support youth mental and physical needs. And really, when we center youth voices, it becomes a space, and a welcoming space in particular, for youth to be accepted for who they are. So this was one of my recommendations that I gave to leadership here. The ones in yellow are youth recommended positions. And again, when we center youth voice, it allows for more impactful and sustainable programs. And so I propose that the board of directors have shared decision-making power with the Madison Youth Arts, like a youth board. And then these positions below work together: the transportation coordinator, an accessibility coordinator, a youth advocate, translators, counselors. All of these positions work together to maximize how youth thrive within the center. And it creates a network of support systems that create these safe and opportunity-rich environments and equitable opportunities for youth well-being and youth resiliency. And so engaging in the arts, spaces like the Madison Youth Arts Center and other art spaces as well, engaging in the arts can foster resiliency. And when we foster resiliency in youth, it leads to better health, developmental, and societal outcomes. In particular, youth designed environments can lead to healthier youth outcomes. And it's a two-way street where it's public health organizations recognizing the value of the arts, as well as arts organizations understanding their role in the public health system and how they can contribute to positive youth development. So it really is a shared responsibility across all sectors to contribute to resilient environments for positive youth development. Okay. These are my references if you would like to have this list later. It's a long list of references. And so I just want to say thank you so much for coming to hear me speak about this. It's something that I'm very passionate about, as well as the work that I'm doing currently. So thank you so much for being here. And now I will take any questions that you have for me. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for sharing your project. It was very interesting and I suspect very timely given some of the challenges that people are going through with COVID.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if you can just comment on you highlighted your recommendations. Were they all adopted by the center, and any observations so far in terms of results?
Sure, absolutely. So you're just asking, now that I presented this to the Madison Youth Arts Center, what recommendations did they put into effect? Yeah, so I know that they just opened the doors a couple months ago, so TBD, but I do know that they in particular were concerned about the data that was surrounding food security and transportation. So I know that those two things were something that they're trying to implement now as soon as possible. I did in the toolkit that I didn't talk about, I did present a logic model to them where I just said, hey, short term, in the first 1 to 2 years, here's what I recommend implementing. The next 3 to 5 years, the next 5 to 10 years, because to implement all of these all at once would be a huge undertaking. Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering, given the location of the MYARTS Center, I was wondering, are you doing anything in conjunction with American Family? They have this sort of community outreach on one of the upper floors of the building, I think is very close to where you are. So I think it would be it could be a very positive relationship. Thanks.
Sure, absolutely. So you were just saying that American Family kind of near that area has an outreach space. and that they would be a great person to partner with. Great, I agree. And also part of this toolkit that I gave to them, and I also want to preface that I don't work for them. So, but this toolkit that I gave them really had a list of here's who you should partner with. And so I will absolutely forward that on, that is an opportunity for them. I also said that, you know, really to be thinking about non-arts partnerships of how they can utilize the space, you know, like the Boys and Girls Club, like the YWCA downtown is also in close proximity. So that was one of the recommendations that I gave as well.
I would be interested to know, was there any consideration given to arranging transportation after school, straight from school to the Youth Arts Center, and then transportation home from there? Seems to me the public transit school bus equivalents could take the kids there if the center had vans that could do the neighborhood trip home.
Sure, absolutely. So you were just saying that there should be a transportation provided to the center and then also from the center.
Well, this is splitting that transportation sort of into public and provided by the Arts Center.
Sure, absolutely. And I would say that recommendations that I gave incorporated both of those things, where perhaps you could then work with the schools and the community centers who already had bus systems, right? So if a youth goes to the Goodman Community Center, then they have their own bus or van that can take them there, as well as their own separate, you know, or a couple other fleets that can then go out into those spaces that also need to be reached. But thank you so much.
Got a question from the Zoom audience? Question from the Zoom audience is, can you speak to the role of the non-parent adult as a protective support system in young people's lives?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So the person who had just asked a question of, can I speak to the importance of building resiliency, and one of those factors is having a non-parent role. And so what this means is really just having a trusted relationship with a non-parent adult. And youth actually identified this in the focus groups as well, that sometimes they can't speak up at home, or perhaps home isn't a safe environment for them. So if there's a safe, trusting adult who they have built a relationship with, then they can perhaps be able to tell them, hey, something's off at home, or I need this support that maybe they couldn't tell their parent, or perhaps their parent is inflicting onto them. So when we think about building resiliency, and we think about the staff in the Madison Youth Arts Center, as well as the staff in other organizations as well, is how can we create resilient environments as well as be a resource for youth.
Other question. I'll ask this one here on the snowballs. That's right. What arts are or will be offered? Music, theater, sculpture, writing, etc. How will that be decided? And who will provide the instruction?
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, so I think right now they really see it as, you know, a space for arts organizations to kind of come in. So one organization can come in and rent this studio space, another organization can come in and rent another studio space. Right now, the focus is on performative arts like music and theater and dance and singing. But I think from the youth focus groups, there really was a wide variety of what you thought of when it came to the arts, ranging from sculpture to fashion design to visual design to architecture. You know, so I hope that in the future it expands into a more a wider approach for the different kinds of arts programming that is offered to youth, including a culinary arts program. You said it has the word arts in it, and I was like, yes, it does. I can't argue with you there.
Well, there's probably something at the Goodman Center as far as cooking there.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is a more general question. We keep hearing so much about homeless children,
Mm-hmm.
children with one or no parents. It appears that there is a great abdication of parental responsibility. And my question is this: why isn't there some effort to enforce parental responsibility on children who are under 18, which I believe is the obligation of parenting? Thanks.
Sure. So your question is There seems to be more discussion and more awareness about the unaccompanied homeless youth who are here in Dane County.
Right.
Why isn't there an emphasis on how parents can be more responsible for this?
Right.
Correct. Whew, I feel like I could talk. This is a whole other lecture that we could that we could go into. But so my understanding in working with Briar Patch Youth Services, who provide a lot of resources and opportunities for youth and teens experiencing homelessness. I think that there's a mix. There's some moments where home isn't safe, right? And I think we experienced that and learned more about that with the pandemic, where safer at home did not mean safer at home for quite a few for millions of children. So I think we want to be careful of always putting the responsibility on the parents. But at the same time, I know that Briar Patch Youth Services, a lot of their opportunities and resources are blending those family dynamics and mending those family dynamics. So I think there's, again, a multifaceted approach for that, but I can talk about that for, for a long time.
The question regarding getting the program started, I'm wondering if there was consideration given to how you get kids to start to come. I'm assuming that oftentimes programs like this, they've had, when they're off the ground, there will be siblings who've been there or friends
Sure.
who've been there, whereas this is a completely new experience.
Mm-hmm.
What, if anything, did you think about in terms of getting that initial trial, for lack of a better word, and getting the first kids to come and building on that, starting to scale?
Sure, absolutely. So your question was, how do we get youth to come to this new space, and what was the thought process behind that? So I think there were, again, this was, I kind of came into a lot of established things within the Madison Youth Arts Center, but it was part of what I was stressing to them of, if you're centering youth voices, then they will want to come to this space. And I think, even just with the youth focus groups that I held, youth were vocalizing afterwards, like, oh, I helped inform, this decision that's being made. I'm excited for the center to open. I want to see, if you implemented what I recommended. And particularly, when it comes to the design of the building, things that are hung up on the wall, the kid has their artwork on the wall, they're going to want to take their friends or their family to see it. And the more that we can build in youth voice, that's just a given, then youth will want to come, as opposed to a build it and they will come kind of mentality.
Couple more from the Zoom chat. One, I'll ask both of them. Is there a plan for the center to invest in a recording studio? And two, how will you let eligible students know of the available options? Recording studio.
Sure. So they were asking if there is a recording studio as well as available options for youth. So I am not sure. That was something that I stressed to them, that almost every focus group wanted a recording studio, a culinary arts program, and a library. So again, I hope that in the future, in the future years, that they do build out a recording studio, because it was something that all youth were interested in. And then the second part was,
How do you let youth know the available options?
how do you let youth know? Again, I will have to check back with them. There were lots of youth solutions for this. Was they would love to be able to, like, not only have a website with a calendar that posted everything that was available, as well as, so they could sign up in advance, or if it's just a random day after school or on the weekend, they say, let's go to the Madison Youth Arts Center, and they are able to walk in, and there's programming that's available for them no matter where or what time of day they come in. So I'm not sure on the process of how that will work or what they decided, but I'm sure it's a work in progress as they figure out this new space and work with many, many artists and arts organizations here in Madison.
You mentioned the county health rankings. Is there a Boolean search or something that we can go to? For example, the Dane county health rankings reference your metrics of youth health and arts and what we're doing here in Dane County compared to different counties in the United States and Wisconsin?
Sure. So you're asking if there's, with the Dane County or with the health rankings model that was developed by UW's Population Health Institute, is there data and research to coincide with that particular model? I am not aware of anything that specifically coincides with that model, but I do know that there is a variety of evidence-based research, particularly through the Center for Arts and Medicine, through the University of Florida, that just has a boundless amounts of different resources, ranging from positive youth development and how that's related to the arts, and how the arts are a part of healthy communities. And I think that that's part of, that fifth wave of public health. It's an emerging part of this public health practice of how we can create a culture of health, and arts and health are just a part of that wave.
All right, one more.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
So as a parent who has a child that is active in the arts and has participated at your building on a weekly basis, I want to say thank you.
Oh.
Like it's been an amazing process to see. For reference, it's a Suzuki Strings in Madison has migrated to
Yes.
to this building, and that has been an amazing experience for that organization. And I'm sure other organizations have also partnered and had similar experiences. I guess my question to you is, what other organizations do you see? And do you see any beyond just the arts, such as like an expansion into maybe the sciences, as a possible augmentation to the center?
Sure, absolutely. So your question was, what other arts organizations are a part of that space and are coming into that space, as well as what other non-arts organizations can utilize the space or have partnerships with. So I think for the arts organizations, if you go on their website for the Madison Youth Arts Center, there's a long list of partnering organizations. But right now, the two anchoring partners are the Children's Theater of Madison and the Madison Youth Choir, and they have moved their offices permanently into the Madison Youth Arts Center space, and that's where their administrative offices are held. But really, again, the space is built so places like Suzuki Strings, like the Madison Ballet, right, can have this place where they can host their programming and then youth can try it out. I think that's what was also important, I think, for youth, is to be able to maybe we have no arts exposure, or maybe we think arts is one thing, but it's actually not. It's a space for people to try new things. And so I'm so glad that you've had to experience that. But I agree. I think with non-arts partnerships is also really important. So I think it would be great to have a partnership here with the Biotech Center of how arts can visualize scientific data. I think would be a really cool way to partner. But I also recommended to them, yes, we need to partner with the Boys and Girls Club. We need to partner with Briar Patch. We need to partner with the Beacon. All of these organizations are an important part of the public health framework, and the Arts Center is a part of that public health framework.
My thoughts on the library include, are they considering that they may need to supply computer support, Wi-Fi support, because schooling is no longer book, paper, pencil.
Absolutely.
And how is that being funded?
Sure. So your question was, what is the stance on, did they build a library into the space, particularly as education moves to a more digital format, as well as computer supplied? So that was something too that youth vocalized. They said, to have this library space where they could do homework, you could rent a tablet, or you could, sit on a computer and not only do homework, but also perhaps, take a course or take a stab at visual design or architecture. So I'm not sure if they have implemented that at this time, but it definitely was something that youth highlighted that they wanted. So I think it's important.
They do have a media center on the second floor, which is well used.
Great. That's great. And all of your questions and suggestions, I will pass on to the board of directors. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. That's